I'm honored to be speaking with Steadicam extraordinaire Paul Edwards. How you doing today, Paul?
I'm very good. Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be called extraordinaire. Doesn't happen very often.
And we're off. Before we dive into some of your more iconic shots from Shaun of the Dead, I wanted to ask you what inspired you to become a Steadicam operator?
Well, before I got into kind of the film and TV world, I was actually an engineer. I did my degree in engineering, mechanical engineering. So I had all that kind of background of interest in gizmos and gadgets and mechanical things. So that was always kind of bubbling around in the background. And it was actually Ted Churchill came across to do the first Steadicam course in the UK at the place called Optex in London. And a bunch of people were invited just at the end when he was due to fly back. He'd finished the course. He was very kind and did a sort of little mini lecture for interested people. And I turned up as one of those people. And I was just completely fascinated. I mean, he's a great kind of showman. And so it was terrific to see some of the shots he'd done and have a bit of access to this very glamorous film world, something which I hadn't gone anywhere near other than watching films. So yeah, that was sort of the inspiration. And he had the rig there and he did a demo and we were all sort of looking at this thinking, this is amazing. How does this work? So that was the start of it. And then it was maybe 3 years after that I actually had the chance to go on a course. And I only really did it as an education because I'm not the biggest of guys. And so I thought you have to be 6 foot wide, 6.5 feet tall, bandana, the full work to be able to do Steadicam. So I thought I was going to do it. I was going to struggle, but at least as an education, I would know about Steadicam when anybody wanted to, spec it for use. So I would be the guy that could talk some sense to. But the course was a week-long course, much like the courses that are run now. By sort of day 3, I remember we were doing, maybe even day 4, we were doing little sort of practice shots. And at the end of the day, everything was taped onto at that point, it was little 8mm videotapes. And we'd sit sort of towards the end of the day and just go through and see what everybody had been doing. One of the shots, then the instructor said, who did this? And I sort of leant over everybody's shoulders and think, I think that's mine. And I remember it was a low mode shot down a corridor. I remember it, up some stairs, down a corridor. It wasn't brilliant, but obviously he sort of said, somebody here's starting to get this. So I did the course and then it was a while longer and when I decided to sort of jump into it. But so inspiration of this sort of man and machine mix, I suppose. Inspiration and as well from, the sort of course guy. It was a guy called Andy Shuttleworth who was in the UK, but not long after went to the States to work. So he was very keen and full of life and very inspirational.
You were shooting Shaun of the Dead in between working on Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. What do you see as the major differences between big budget and smaller budget films?
I did quite a lot of the Harry Potters. A lot of the time there is no difference. You do find that people who don't have the opportunity to work on, this sort of stupid budget films, they have certain assumptions. And one of them is that it must be nice to have all those resources and all that time. And that's kind of all the resources, maybe. But the time, that's the one thing I still find. I still work on various things with different budgets. And there's always the same kind of pressure of time because you are spending on a big budget, you're spending so much every hour. And that pressure is on everybody to, the first to keep things going and the production to schedule things. Everybody's under the same kind of time pressure. So really, in a lot of ways, there isn't a huge difference between them. You just get kind of to play with bigger toys and you have the opportunities to work with some incredible actors. So that's a real privilege. In terms of your day and your attitude to what you're doing, it should really be the same. It shouldn't really be different. A lot of the early years I spent bouncing around a lot of different projects, bits of corporate things where there was very, very little money. And then I could maybe at the end of the week do some Harry Potter days and then back to some TV stuff, which you're expected to shoot a lot more pages. But in general, I always felt, and I always had and still do have the attitude that you're kind of the same person. Some of the DPs I work with, I'm impressed with their attitude to life, and they will spend just as much time talking to a trainee and being interested in their life than they would somebody that is a world-renowned focus puller who they've worked with for maybe 20 films. I admire that and aspire to that kind of attitude, really.
Your first day on Shaun of the Dead was the famous trip to the shop. Before we dive into the shop more, talk to me about walking on set as a day player and not knowing Edgar Wright or the director of photography David Dunlap beforehand.
But that time, that was pretty much my life. Half the time was walking onto sets, which, as you say, you don't really know anybody. By that point, I was bumping into the same people in terms of camera department. So you maybe know the focus puller, recognize the trainee, maybe know the loader on B camera. You know, it was that kind of thing. But as you say, the people who you have to interact with well and efficiently, director, DP, and to some extent, you know, the actors as well. Yeah, going in cold. It's not a nice kind of position to be in.
Hmm.
And I remember that sort of time because nearly 20 years ago, those kind of years, I do remember the feeling of getting the call sheet the day before and going through and trying to pick out names that you knew. Because that was quite, I mean, I guess if you had one or two, it's like you knew the gaffer or maybe some people on the electrical team or the sound department. It made a real difference because you felt you could turn up without completely cold, just who's who. That's the thing. I mean, you're learning names as well. You've got 20 names to learn. That's not my strength,
Yeah.
particularly as well. I was really bad at that. I blame the fact that I used to bounce around lots, so the names were changing almost day to day, but that's not really fair. It's
Hmm.
actually that I'm just very, very bad at it. But yeah, you have to get up to speed quickly. They're doing half the work because they don't know you and they're trying to communicate quickly and efficiently as much as they can. Edgar, particularly, obviously, this was a big, big shot for the film and very brave move to have so much riding on. It just had to work because if your first day of the film and it doesn't go well and you've just blown the day of your budget, it
Yeah.
wasn't a very big budget.
And it was one of the first shots of the production, right?
It was the first shot. I remember setting up with a little Steadicam stand outside that little white gate that Simon Pegg comes out of. Yeah, we did the zombie shot first, so it was the following day to the shops shot first. I think because they worked out that it was easier to do the complicated stuff and then go backwards than it was to start with everybody non-zombie and then zombify them.
How much of a reset was that? Like you said, you shot the post zombie apocalypse shot first, and then you guys reset and did the clean version.
Yeah, from one to the other. Do you know what? I can't really remember. I dove back into my diary, and strangely, I actually have some notes on that. That was May the 11th, 2003.
Wow.
It says Mother's Day in the USA and Australia. It was what we call continuous day, so 8:30 start, which meant we should have shot continuous 10 hours, so no break,
Hmm.
through to 6:30. I can't remember ever waiting around. Edgar knows exactly what he wants. He was very specific. I remember being very sort of intense, you know, not in a bad way, but I think he had this in his head and he knew he had to get it into my legs for my timing, you know, so he could see it on the screen. You know, we sort of built the shot up slowly. I can't remember how many takes. I think we did a lot of takes. I
Mm.
can't remember how many. And I didn't make any notes for that. We get halfway through and maybe have to stop. But the actual break between the zombie and the non-zombie shot, it's trying to be much time. I think we must have started rehearsing almost straight away the non-zombie shot and talking through all the little notes to remember that when we're following him, remember there we had the zombie on the floor. So particularly looking deep as we're parallel to Simon,
Mhm.
looking deep into the sort of little front garden, seeing the front doors. We need to be able to see that pathway at this point because Edgar was saying, remember, we got a zombie there. So we need to show previous day that's clear, you know, and basically picking out various points during the shot to remind me that these are sort of key points that we will have hit already on this zombie shot. It was just non-stop, you know, I think it was just a non-stop day for Steadicam.
Mhm. Talk to me about that because, Edgar's notorious for timing sequences to a rhythm. This particular shot needed to be in sync with every element seen on camera. Can you expand on some of the challenges that brought up?
Simon Pegg was really good with this. Now, I didn't really realize until later how in tune he was with the camera. I think it's fair to say he probably likes Steadicam because he's very aware of the camera there and he can just feel when you have to slow down and rotate a bit to bring something in the background. It just felt like he was completely in tune. He could feel when I was doing that, and all his timing was helping to drive me. We were trying to open up the streets so that we start close on the gate, and then I see his hand comes in, and we pull back, and we had the football, the kid with the football hitting him in the face, which took a few takes as well. We had to stop there a few times, I remember. And then pivoting around. Yeah, it was key points. It was trying to get a little bit profile so we could see up that huge, long perspective of the street. and see our man in the car. It was really just a kind of flowing thing. We sort of had a go, and it became, as soon as the people had kind of been placed, it was obvious how I had to kind of keep pivoting around Simon to get things in at various points. We crossed the road. It was a difficult timing with the car coming, but obviously I had to be looking down the road when that happens, but not too early, because obviously you see it starting off, waiting to come to its stop. And then I was sort of behind Simon quite a bit, so it was quite a race to get past the car
Mhm,
where the guy was washing the car one day,
mhm.
because at that point I have to be parallel to him to see into the house that's just to the side of him. And then we have somebody running through. I think the challenge was, it was fairly clear where you had to get, but it was just getting between them quite smoothly and not making it look like the camera was having to rush to get from A to B. It had to look fairly natural. We were on the journey with Simon getting to the shop. You have to be careful that it didn't feel like the camera sort of got too separated from him, because then you become aware that it was a camera and not just you following him to the shop.
Right.
You got sort of 80% there fairly quickly. And then it was just all the sort of trimmings of trying to maximize. So just pivoting around a little bit more in front of him so we could see a bit more deep background, get a couple more zombies in, and then hanging on to that frame as long as you can, knowing that in about 3 or 4 seconds time, you need to be, instead of in front, you need to be parallel. So it was just smooth transitions really was the key to it, I think.
We don't need to get into any gossip, but were you aware there was ongoing differences of opinion between Dunlap and Wright before arriving? And did any of that affect the production and how it went that day?
That day, no, there was no. I think I was concentrating so much because it was a big day for the film. It was a big day for me as well, because I turn up and then it's like, what's the Steadicam shot? Well, this is the Steadicam shot, followed by all the coverage on Steadicam, followed by another Steadicam shot that's not quite as long, and that's the day. I was concentrating on getting through the day, to be honest.
Gotcha.
In fact, in my little notes in the diary, I put in Day of Hell, Day of Hell with Ari LT and a 24 mil. That was my one-line summary. So I think I was pretty shattered by the end of the day.
Wow.
So I wasn't really aware of, any who was getting on with whom or who wasn't, or any conversations that had been taken part. I was just absorbing as much as I could. I was listening to Edgar, I was listening to David for, like the lights in the fridge and all this kind of thing. And do you see that cable? And, those kind of little technicalities.
Gotcha. Just staying focused.
Yeah, just get the job. Don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Don't mess it up. I did feel a lot of pressure.
hmm
It wasn't particularly a sort of lightweight build either. So, you were glad for a bit of a reset. Just a couple of minutes to
Yeah.
get your legs to rest.
Yeah. Later on in the movie, you have a shot that leads Shaun through the house to kill Philip. Right before the whip pan, Barbara says, "No fighting, you two," which is a line that personally makes me shake with laughter every single time. Was there ever any time during the production you found the gag so funny it became distracting?
No. I was very aware of the humor. I mean, I try not to do it because I'm always aware of if the actor picks up on it, but I found myself smiling. So I was smiling inside, and that made me smile outside, because just to appreciate the kind of, especially, Simon Pegg is such a natural comedian.
hmm
It just seems to be so effortless, but it's not. It's like that smile of admiration. I remember that because he's obviously enjoying so much what he's doing, and he's very, very good at it. It's just really nice to be in that kind of company with somebody who just does their job so well and makes it look so easy. But yeah, the laugh out loud moments, even consequently, that I found really funny when you're shooting. And it's only really with comedy. I never really get the comedy as well when I'm sort of there present.
hmm
Probably because, I'm just sort of concentrating and thinking, oh, yeah, that's really funny. And it's not till you see the film or whatever, you realize it's really funny. It's different with emotional scenes. I really feel emotional scenes when I'm shooting them.
mm
I just think, oh, God, I'm near to tears here. I don't know how they do this.
hmm
It's just amazing. That connects with me. But with comedy, not so much. It's only really afterwards that I suppose I can relax and I don't quite get drawn into the comedy.
Right. Let's move on to the rescue Liz sequence. You said this was your favorite day of shooting. Besides the obvious fun of watching Shaun comedically bash in the undead's faces, why do you have such great memories of that day?
It was a beautiful, hot, sunny day. I remember that to start with. And we were all in quite a kind of relaxed mood. We came onto this housing estate, and we had sort of a big chunk of it under our control. So it was kind of a good start to the day. For a Steadicam op, it's always good when you get stuff to do which isn't going to be chopped up and edited, because you feel that you're creating a sort of a linear piece of the film which is actually going to be used. So that's always really nice. So it was actually a tough one because, he was running away from me.
It's an amazing shot, Paul. You start inside of the car. You're panning back and forth between the front and back seat, and then Shaun
Yeah.
exits through the sunroof. And then as the Jaguar speeds off, the shot continues through the yard, and then Shaun's racking up zombie points, and then you land on an extreme close up of the keypad. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I'm just glad it works. We had a bit of a struggle. Well, I had a bit of a struggle because we didn't want to slow it down because he's got all this energy. This is the sort of, right, I'm going. So he launches himself away from the car, having to get through all the zombies. And there was a certain natural pace which Simon went at, and it was uphill as well. So that wasn't good for me. So by the end, I think it was the final hit, the final zombie, because I don't think any of these guys were professionals. I think I'm right in saying that. They were all, fans of the show and friends of Simon or Edgar, or it's a real mix of people. But they were pretty damn good. But the last guy, which was a really nice hit, Simon hits him with a cricket bat. He spins round. But unfortunately, the guy spins in shot, but drops right in front of me. So I have to get over him. And
that's right before you do your extreme close-up, though, right?
Yeah. So I'm here in front of this guy, and this extreme close-up is about 20 feet away. Just no way I can get there, really. I did the old Garrett Brown trick of not asking somebody to do something, not asking Simon to slow down, but just saying what my problem was, which is, this hit looks terrific, and he spins right in front of camera. But I'm being really slow because I'm having to be really, really careful to kind of step over wherever he ends up. And I'm sort of losing you a bit there. And then Simon just, oh, don't worry, you notice. But on that bit, when he does the hit, he takes a moment. He turns around, looks towards camera, which all actors obviously love to do. He looks back to camera, but it's like a moment of assessment. It's like, well, okay, I've got through these guys, and now it's the door. But that sort of, second or so, because I don't stop at all. I just keep going. And it just gives me that little bit of time to get closer to him. So when he turns back and goes to the door, I managed to get to the door bells just before I need to,
Fantastic information. I love hearing that. And so let's talk about the reverse shot. The timing on that was so exacting. You're leading them back to the Jaguar, and the second you frame up the hero shot of all four characters, you whip pan to the car. It's just fantastic. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
In some ways, that was harder than going in. It wasn't as quick because basically the group couldn't move as fast as he was moving forwards. But yeah, it was the same problem of trying to, this is the great thing about Steadicam. You have such good peripheral vision. So we'd lined up the zombies, and Simon came forward with the bat. And obviously the trick was want to bring any zombie in too early because there's a dead space. So I had to bring them in just at the last second for each one, so that as the bat hit, their face was in shot. So again, it was just kind of having key points which you have to hit. And it was all really about timing and just feeding in each hit as it happened. And then I'm not sure if I think we had them all marked for the end. So I think they were landing on marks, and I had a mark as well to hit. So I was really pleased actually with the end framing, that sort of heroic
great
framing. It's really nice because I'm down the hill a little bit. It's like the grassy knoll. I'm down a bit lower, so they've got that heroic look. I'm looking up at them. And then the whip pan is a trick shot. So that's whip off and then whip on, and it's edited together onto the car. Not even sure I did the whip on. That might have been a tripod actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the end of that shot was the whip off. Let the beat to let them see the car, and then whip off as fast as I can. And I remember actually I didn't have the gimbal on the Steadicam post quite tight enough. So the first time I whipped, the gimbal whipped, and the rest of the camera stayed where it was because the gimbal to post connection wasn't quite tight enough.
Your last day of shooting was the shot where you lead the group through the backyards to a chance meeting with the Yvonne of the Dead group. It starts with a wide shot to include all the characters and their personality traits, then gradually squeezes the frame to focus on Shaun and Liz directly into the jump scare. Jump scares don't play as well in wide shots. Did Wright already have those nuances on the page before you arrived, or was that worked out during the walkthroughs?
That was all worked out beforehand. Yeah, we want to see all the group, we establish them, and then it kind of closes down into the Shaun and Liz dialogue. The trickiest bit, not falling over the weeds and everything else in the way along the path, but apart from that, the trickiest bit was at the end. Simon was so good at this. It's his step forward which helps bring me onto the group, the sort of mirror image group. That's what gives the camera energy. So he's with Liz most of the time, and then I can't remember the last bit of dialogue, but then after it's over and we now want to see the other mirror group, Simon does quite a big step forward relative to Liz, and I kind of go with him and slow down a bit, and the whole frame pivots, and landing into shot is this huge long group. That was the trickiest to line up and get right. And obviously, it was all dialogue based, so I had to sort of keep my ears open. It was nice because we were fairly wide lens wise, so I was fairly close. I could hear everything that was going on and hear all the sort of nuances of timing. But yeah, everything I think that I did with Shaun of the Dead was in Edgar's head.
Wow.
As images almost. He knew exactly what he was doing. I think he'd been planning it for ages and ages and ages and knew he just had to get it down on film. That was the last challenge, I think. Everything else had been done. He knew he had the actors and the script had all been honed down. So it was just this last bit, the last essential bit. He was very on top of everything.
Fantastic. Have you seen Shaun of the Dead with an audience?
Yeah, I've seen it with an audience. And that was quite amazing because it had a pretty good buzz when I went to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of come and people were talking about it. That's when I saw it in the cinema. I've got an idea that I had seen it at a cast and crew before that. And it was great to hear the response. You just feel that the whole room is enjoying it.
Yeah, what was the audience reaction?
It was great. It's so funny. Not so much the laugh out loud bits that I like the most. It's the subtle nuances that the characters do.
Oh, for sure.
And the little pauses of exasperation and when shoulders drop just before they say something. It's those like nuances just make it so real.
Yeah.
You know, I love those things. I love
for
them.
sure. You've gone on to work on the majority of the Harry Potter movies. You've shot movies for Danny Boyle, Ridley Scott, a bunch of Guy Ritchie movies. Looking back on this small budget movie, what does Shaun of the Dead mean to you in your career?
Well, it's quite funny because out of all the shoots I've done, my involvement really was quite, minor. I wasn't in it for the whole sort of 9 or 10 weeks, whatever the shooting schedule was. I wasn't living it in that way. At the point I did it, it was really nice to do long Steadicam shots, the cricket back scene and, to the shops and back scene. Those kind of things stuck out for quite a while. And it wasn't really until Shaun of the Dead became such a cult thing and people sort of tapped me on the shoulder and, say, somebody said, you worked on Shaun of the Dead, the Steadicam. Did you do that? Yeah. Wow. What was it like? That kind of, and you think, wow, yeah. Well, it was just in amongst all the rest of the things I was doing then. So it wasn't really like a career break thing.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of grew afterwards. But it's great to have done it. I imagine sometimes what would it have been like to have worked on, I don't know, 2001 or done some days on Lawrence of Arabia, those kind of things. And I think this is probably as close as I'm ever going to get to it because it's so iconic. I mean, and people love it. It's great that people love it.
I love that you just compared Lawrence of Arabia and Shaun of the Dead. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think there's a desert drama / zombie film to be made. Yeah, the crossover. Romantic comedy in the desert with zombies. But anything that becomes iconic, it's lovely that whatever way you were involved in it, you were sort of there. It's quite nice.
Are there any Steadicam ops out there that you look up to? Any particular shots that amaze you?
In a way, I look up to anybody who sticks a Steadicam on. It's a crazy profession. Well, anybody who does Steadicam and makes it look easy, which the good guys do, I think that's to be admired because everybody assumes that they know what's going on within somebody's head and through somebody's body when they're doing Steadicam. You do Steadicam, it's a different thing when you're doing it. It looks so much easier and sleeker and effortless when you're looking from the outside. But in terms of names, I suppose Larry McConkey is the one op who kind of just wows with his shots that he's done, really iconic. Shots like Bonfire of the Vanities and Brian De Palma films, Untouchables.
Goodfellas and all that.
Yeah, and if you want to find the really unusual, impressive shots, it's usually Larry who's sort of been involved with them. He's such a character. I've only met him once. He was doing the Hugo Cabret film, the Scorsese film in Shepperton Studios in London. And that was being shot 3D. It was a Cameron Pace 3D rig. We were going to use it on our next film, big sort of epic, and it was going to be 3D. So it was my job to do the Steadicam. And so I went in to sort of have a chat with him because that sort of rig, as in not Steadicam rig, but the 3D rig that he was using was going to be rebuilt for us to use on our film. So I got to have a chat with Larry and his rig. It was just full of little brackets and just so Larry. It was very, very sort of geeky and little things that were fixed, and he's very into his technical stuff.
You've got the new Doctor Strange movie coming out. Any other projects that you can talk about?
Yeah, Doctor Strange is May, I think, which we shot through, well, we were supposed to start in March 2020, and then it got pushed because of COVID. There was a big break. We eventually started it like 6 months later, and That was my first COVID movie, which
Oh,
was
wow.
horrible, really. It was good. They were taking everything very seriously, and they built a huge set on the back lot, and it was quite cold, and we had masks, we had shields all the time.
Hmm.
That was the protocol, and you just couldn't see anything. That was the problem.
Yeah.
Everything was steaming up, but I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
And do you have any other projects you can talk about?
Coming up, um, yeah, I've just finished an unusual film for Netflix called Enola Holmes. Well, it's the
Mm,
second Enola
yeah.
Holmes film. We did the first one, which was my last movie before COVID arrived, so end of 2019. Quite unusual in that it's mostly shot on Steadicam. Yeah, every day is a kind of 10-hour Steadicam day,
Oh, man.
and almost every shot is Steadicam. All the Steadicam shots, all the coverage, and the idea is to get everything moving, so that the camera always has this feeling that it's moving all the time.
Hmm.
So we did that in 2019, and it did really well. And they decided that we're going to do a second one. So we shot that end of last year, 2021. So sort of 10 weeks flat out. Coming up, who knows? I mean, there's a couple of things which I might be doing. I'm having a bit of a break now after that Enola Holmes extravaganza. It's good to take a few weeks off and recover
Right.
and, pay some attention to the kit and everything.
Nice.
But yeah, I quite like the idea that I never quite pin anything down too much, because it's still quite exciting when the phone rings and somebody says, "Hey, how about, or such and such is doing this. Would you be interested?" And it's quite exciting.
Sam Raimi wants you to come shoot the Doctor Strange movie. Yeah, sure, I'll be there.
Yeah, he was such a sweet guy. Couldn't believe he's so funny. His dry sense of humor. I mean, I'm usually quite good on senses of humor, but he caught me out completely. I really thought I'd upset him, and it took me a while to work out, oh, wow, he's taking the piss. He's fine.
That's great.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't say, enough about what a lovely guy he was.
Is he still wearing the suits and ties at the set?
No, no, must have given that up.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
no,
That was his famous
yeah.
trademark, is showing up with a tie and dressing really nice for all his
Oh,
shoots.
wow. Yeah, no, lots of jeans and things. So, yeah, he must have given that up.
I guess we're getting the second iteration of Sam Raimi now. That's
Yeah,
fantastic
maybe.
to hear.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else that I didn't cover that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, it was so nice to be involved. And I've seen Simon Pegg sort of on odd occasions on projects since then. And he always remembers me. I mean, some actors you've worked with, and they kind of look at you quizzically, do I know you? I mean, I'm sure he kind of doesn't remember my name maybe or whatever, and asks some way, but he's always lovely. He comes up to me and says, "Hey, Paul, how are you doing?" And he'll introduce me to, other cast members. "Oh, this is Paul. He did Steadicam on Shaun of the Dead." It's really nice, isn't it, that he looks back and sees how important Shaun of the Dead was to everybody, and wants to kind of remember it and, include you in it, I suppose.
Yeah,
It's really nice.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much for your time, Paul. Continued success with your career. I look forward to seeing your future work.
Thank you.
Thank you for being such an important part of something so special to me. I really appreciate it. Cheers.
No problem at all. Thanks very much for having me.